So how do you know when you're buying something online and it's the real deal, not a real steal? Dan Ackerman is the senior editor of CNET.com. How do we know what we've bought is the real deal?
Well, on eBay, most of the time people can buy and sell stuff with no problems, but there are a very small percentage of people who are looking to rip you off. So there are some things you should do before you bid and things you should do after you bid. Now, before you bid, obviously you want to check out the seller, look at their feedback. Everybody who's selling stuff on eBay has a feedback rating, and people leave comments based on previous auctions. So you want to make sure they've got good feedback, and hopefully it's for similar types of items to the one that you want to buy. And of course, you look over the ad very carefully, make sure there's no fine print you're not going to like, make sure you're actually buying the item, not the box the item came in or a photo of the item. There's a lot of little scams people try to work like that. Well, if you get something and you open it up and it's a brick in a box, there are some things you can do. If you use PayPal to pay for your item that you bought, that's really what you should do. That's a company that's actually owned by eBay, and they will do a lot to help protect you in case of fraud.
Other items, big-ticket items to beware?
You should definitely watch out for anything that's too expensive if you're buying it over eBay. Use PayPal and just use common sense.
Dan Ackerman, great advice. We can go back and shop now. Thanks.
It's the summer of 1985, which in Moscow is still actually kind of cold. Alexei Pajitnov, a low-level programmer, is sitting around. He puts together Tetris. It's the most simple puzzle game you can think of, stacking blocks, but there's something magical about it. Now, the game eventually ends up in Hungary, in Budapest, at a trade show. Some Hungarian guys had made like an Apple version of it. And this guy, Robert Stein, comes in. He's like an opportunist who travels around trying to buy up stuff cheap and sell it more expensively somewhere else. And he sees the game. He says, this game is great. I'm not even going to buy this game. I'm just going to steal it.
Manhunt 2, though, some say, takes on a new perspective.
It's definitely gory. It can be a little over the top, but the movements that you're making are still very kind of vague and kind of hard to... If you didn't see what you were doing on the screen, you wouldn't know what you're doing with your hands. Only when you put it together with the image do you realize I'm coming up behind a guy and strangling him.
Dan Ackerman, senior editor at CNET.com, reviews the multi-billion-dollar gaming industry and shows me how Wii's controller is motion sensitive. You're involved in a macabre sort of way, but...
And yet all these games have a moral code to them where if you do certain things, it's really going to hurt you.
Nintendo did not develop the game, but stresses it is rated for mature audiences. And while Dan Ackerman says the first version was not a huge success for Rockstar Games...
I think the Rockstar guys are laughing all the way to the bank every time somebody complains about Manhunt 2.
I think for this kind of stuff, we're taking 2 steps forward and maybe 2.5 steps back. We finally got to the point where we can say, hey, I don't want to watch these on TV when the programming guide says they should be on. But now when we get them from these networks, they have all these rules attached to them. I can download it. I can't fast forward past the commercials. It'll self-destruct in 7 days.
Right.
I can't put it on my iPod. It's too much. It's too complicated.
But Dan, let's talk about Rumble. I mean, it's back, but no big surprise, right? I mean, this was the worst-kept secret.
This is the worst-kept secret in probably the history of gaming, at least this year. And of course, Sony was not fooling anybody when they said people didn't want Rumble. They wanted motion-sensitive controls.
Right.
But now they finally solved their lawsuit problems and are putting Rumble back in. We're all pretty pleased about that. But no price cut. You know, we had a price cut around E3, so I think that's fine.
This is the biggest marketing push yet for a video game, but will it pay off? And Dan Ackerman is editor of CNET.com. How big of a deal is this?
This is a really big deal for Microsoft because the other big holiday game everyone's been waiting for, Grand Theft Auto 4, has been delayed until next year. And that leaves the playing field wide open for Halo to come in and be the dominant player this holiday season.